Hey, welcome back to the podcast. We're going to break down um, some pretty big news for the upcoming um, Trump and Zelensky meeting right after the Alaska summit. So we're going to watch what Marco Rubio, uh, I guess his thought process and his breakdown of what tomorrow is gonna happen. There's going to be some European leaders, uh, I guess, in virtual attendance um, that sidelines with Zelensky when he visits the White House at the invitation of Trump. So let's see what we got.
Joining me now is the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who was also on the trip to Alaska with President Trump and who will be there tomorrow with President Trump and Zelensky.
So the Alaska summit was 3v3. So you have the on the American side, you have Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Steve Witkoff, the uh, envoy, the businessman, and then Trump. And then from I think the Russian side, I only know one. I only know Putin and his side dude. I don't know the other guy. Um, and it's his foreign ministry guy, Lavrov, I think. Yeah, Lavrov.
At the White House. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Why did President Trump's meeting with Putin end with no ceasefire? And what does Putin want?
Yeah, well, a couple things. First of all, if you recall, there's no way you can have a meeting like that. And we never said there was going to be a deal coming out of the meeting because the Ukrainians are not there. This is a war between two countries. It's not America. It's Ukraine and Russia. We met with.
I mean, Trump did technically say that if, for the purpose of this meeting with the Alaska summit is to just secure a ceasefire deal. And if that wasn't the goal, then it was the whole purpose of the summit. I know that Trump went in for a listening mode, but
The Russian side. We've spoken repeatedly with the Ukrainian side. We'll see them again tomorrow in person, along with our allies in Europe. So I do think some progress was made in that talk in terms of narrowing down the issues set. And now these are hard issues that remain. You know, the conversation about where the territorial lines are going to be, questions about long-term security guarantees and who Ukraine can have military alliances with, things like that.
so I watched this video already once. I wanted to stress on this that I don't think any country should be able to determine what another country have as far as military alliance or alliances in general or ally. I think that's a very risky way to do business, especially in foreign relations.
These are difficult things, but I do believe we made progress in narrowing down the issue set, but there's a lot of work that remains. There's a reason why this war has been going on for 3.5 years. It's a war that never would have happened.
Actually, not 3.5 years. I don't know why. I mean, I guess all these guys kind of really hit on the what he's going to say next is that Trump inherited from Biden, which technically is true that he inherited, but he inherited from Obama actually, because the war actually started in 2014 when the Russians annexed Crimea. So it's been going on for 11 years and counting, not 3.5 years. And the talking points really comes down to Obama send blankets and MREs, and Trump send javelins. So some of it might be true, but at the end of the day, what did Trump do during his first administration? About it. So
Had President Trump been president, but he inherited it. And now he's trying to do everything he can to bring about peace. He's made peace a priority of his administration, as you've seen with all the peace deals we've been able to achieve throughout the world. This one's the hardest one. Everyone acknowledges that. But he's the only one in the world that has any chance of doing it. Look, peace may not be possible at the end of the day. We don't know. But if it is possible, he's the only one that can get it done. And that's why everyone's asking him. They're asking him to meet with Putin. And they're also.
So I do agree with Rubio on this point that, I guess in the grand scheme of things, Trump really is technically, the best at negotiating on behalf just because of using American as I guess as a hitting point that, or I guess peace through strength in in his version. So yeah, I do agree with him on this point.
Asking him to come here tomorrow and meet with him to talk further about what we do next.
A European diplomat has confirmed to Fox that President Trump supports Putin's proposal for Russia to take full control of Luhansk and Donetsk, all of Donbass. Do you support this move?
No, first of all, I don't know who told you that, but they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, the president has said that in terms of territories and stuff, these are things that Zelensky's going to have to decide on. These are things that the Ukrainian side is.
This is great. I'll show you the map here in after some later down the road, but it's you have to understand. Yes, I understand there's going to be land swaps, but there's strategic reason why the Russians want those regions and not the other regions. So yes, land swap will be necessary, but we have to look at what give and take looks like.
Going to have to agree to. That's all the president is trying to do here is narrow down the open issues, narrow them down, and then see if we can play some role in bringing that closer together so we can stop and end this war once and for all. Look, this war is only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. You've seen that in the escalation and the attacks. Russia's economy is now 100% full-time war footing. They are producing munitions. The Ukrainians are as well. Both sides are hitting each other very, very hard. And the war is only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. So he's trying to do everything he can to bring it to an end. But people that are out there talking what they don't know with all these stupid leaks and things of that nature, they all want to just sound important. They don't know what they're talking about. The president's been very clear.
I don't like how he really said this. I mean, he's one of the the trifectas, the Three Musketeers that was in the room with the Russian counterparts, and during the press, I guess the press briefing between Trump and Putin, there was really nothing of relevance that was said. So it kind of I don't and this video was made after the summit, and I mean if you have the two presidents having one of the most important summit and nothing was said, what did you expect the audience? Everybody's going to speculate.
In terms of like what Zelensky's going to agree to, that's up to them to decide. They're going to have to decide what they're willing to give, and ultimately what they're going to get, what they're going to demand as well. Both sides are going to, but here's what I can tell you for certain. You can't have a peace deal between two warring factions unless both sides agree to give up something and both sides agree that the other side gets something. Right? Otherwise, if one side gets everything they want, that's not a peace deal. It's called surrender. And I don't think this is a war that's going to end anytime soon on the basis of surrender. So this is tough stuff. I mean, it's difficult to bring these two sides together. We made some progress, we believe, and now we'll have to follow up on that progress. And ultimately, where this should lead is to a meeting between the three leaders, between Zelensky, Putin, and President Trump, where we can finalize. But we got to get this thing closer before we get to that point.
I mean,
what does Europe want, Secretary?
Given up anything territory-wise.
Well, look, I think the role that Europe can play ultimately in the long term is on security guarantees that Ukraine has been talking about. They should play a key element in that regard. And I also think that Europeans are very helpful being in the room sometimes and sort of giving ideas about, what accommodations can be made and what flexibility the Ukrainian side could have. So that's the role that they've played up to this point. The president invited them to come here. He told President Zelensky to come on Monday and bring European leaders that he chose to bring with him. So there's a handful of heads of state that will be here as well tomorrow at the invitation of the president to see if we can make some progress.
I think I only know few. I don't know if there's going to be more European representatives and heads of state, but I think Ursula von is going to be there. Mark Rutte, the NATO secretary, is going to be there. Virtual-wise, Keir Starmer's, Macron. There's another guy that I'm missing, but mostly all three head states, or several heads of states, including some alliance members as well. So,
on some of these points, the president spoke.
Oh, I think Finnish. I think Finnish leader, one of their president is going to be on the virtual call. I've heard that Finnish and the Finnish president and Trump gets along really well. So they're kind of, I guess, learning some tips and tricks on how to, I guess, deal with Trump. So we don't have another Zelensky Trump Oval Office 2.0 happen again.
To many of these leaders on the airplane, I think it was 2 o'clock in the morning our time. It was probably 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning their time on our way back from Alaska. And and then yesterday I had a call with all the national security advisors of the different countries. So we've got a work agenda ahead of us over the next few days, and we've been talking about these things now for a while as well. So because we also talked to them before, we had multiple meetings and conversations with them leading up to the events in Alaska. So they can play a very constructive role here. But ultimately, only President Trump, if a peace deal is possible, he's the only one that can bring it about.
Is Europe still buying Russian oil?
Well, if you look at the oil that's going to China and being refined, a lot of that is then being sold back into Europe. Europe's also buying natural gas still. Now, there are countries trying to wean themselves off of it. But there's more Europe can do with regards to their own sanctions. If they're always talking about sanctions, and they've got a sanctions package coming out as well. But an additional sanctions package supposedly coming out soon. So, but for us, I think the most important role that Europe can play here is to have a constructive role in building up those security guarantees that will allow Ukraine the potential flexibility to make a deal on the rest of the issues that are at stake.
Well, I mean, wouldn't that be a major lever to pull, to put sanctions on Europe or punish Europe for continuing to buy oil and gas from Russia? Is that something on the table?
Well, I don't know about on Europe directly, obviously, but certainly there are implications to secondary sanctions. If you put secondary sanctions on a country, let's say you were to go after the oil sales of Russian oil to China. Well, China just refines that oil. That oil is then sold into the global marketplace, and anyone who's buying that oil would be paying more for it, or if it doesn't exist, would have to find an alternative source for it. So we have heard, when you talk about the Senate bill that was being proposed where there's 100% tariffs on China and India, we did hear from a number of European countries, not in press releases, but we heard from them some concern about what that could mean. But look, I don't want to get into a tit-for-tat with the Europeans on this. I think they can play a very constructive role here in helping us get to that point. And the president has kept them in the loop. The first call the president made as soon as the meeting with Putin was over was to the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, who will be there tomorrow as well. We've been in touch with them over and over again with regards to this process. So I think the president's done an incredible job here of trying to bring the sides together. There's a lot of work that still remains. You don't have a deal, as the president says, until you have a deal. This is not an easy deal. This is not a war that began under President Trump. It's not, as you saw acknowledged at the press conference there in Alaska, it's actually a war that would not have happened had President Trump been in the White House. He inherits a 3-year-old war, and now he's trying to untangle it. And because if this falls apart, this thing's going to get far worse and go on much longer. Thousands and thousands of more people are going to die and be injured as a result of this.
Can you give us any clarity on a timeline in terms of the U.S.'s thinking? I mean, obviously, there's no ceasefire in place right now. What are the repercussions? Are we just going to watch the murders continue?
No, look, at some point, a decision has to be made if a peace deal is possible or not. If at some point it becomes clear that both sides are so far apart and so dug in that we're just not near a peace deal, then the president will have a decision to make about how much more time do we invest in it and what actions does he take then. But I want everyone to understand, if this morning the president woke up and...
So this is where I guess I kind of disagree with Rubio a little bit, mainly because the goal was for a ceasefire, and then peace negotiations can continue on top of it. But I don't know why he's saying that if peace deal cannot be reached from the start, parties will walk away. I mean, Ukrainians have already submitted, for a unconditional ceasefire, where the Russians are demanding for maximum list demands. But
said, I'm putting these terrible, strong sanctions on Russia. That's fine. It may make people feel good for a couple hours, but here's what you're basically saying. You're saying talks are over. for the foreseeable future, for the next year or year and a half, there's no more talks because there's no one else in the world that can talk to him. Okay, Putin's not going to meet with Macron. He's not going to meet with the UK. With all due respect to these leaders, none of these leaders are going to be able to bring him to the table and talk to them. There's only one leader in the world that has any chance of bringing these two sides together. If there is a chance, there's only one leader in the world that can do it, and that's President Trump. And you forfeit that role the minute you put additional sanctions on him. We may get to that point, unfortunately, but if we do,
Not exactly. Um, Not exactly, because I I think I'm gonna make a separate video on this, but I really don't think that um, it was because of India um, that you know Putin reached out and wanted a meeting with with Trump. I think that he's very intelligent in his timing. I think that he is buying time for another breakthrough, potentially in Pokrovsk and some other regions, some other advances that the Ukraine that the Russians can and use it again, use it as more leverage and bargaining chip. But I think that, and also delaying the sanctions that was supposed to be imposed, but kept being pushed back and back. So
means that peace talks are no longer possible, and that would be very unfortunate because the real world ramifications are that while we're here calling each other names and doing TV interviews about this stuff and all of that in American politics, there are people who today will be injured and killed in the battlefield and in cities, in Ukraine, on the front lines, and even in Russia. Even as we speak, people that have nothing to do with this war are suffering as a result of it. And I think we are very fortunate and blessed and should be thankful to have a president that has made peace and the achievement of peace a priority of his administration. We've seen it in Cambodia and Thailand. We've seen it in India, Pakistan. We've seen it in Rwanda and the DRC. And we're going to continue to pursue.
So with these patterns, with all of maybe with India, it's a little bit more relevant, but um, with all the other, potential wars that could have escalated, I really think that none of the wars are really comparable. Yet, yeah, I agree that some of the wars have been going on for decades, like Rwanda and DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Uh, you know, it's a deadly war between those some of the countries. But at the same time, all of those countries are heavily dependent on the U.S., where the Russians aren't really dependent on the U.S. economy. Um, and maybe during the Alaska summit, where Trump is using the U.S. economics uh, as a bargaining chip to potentially, secure a trade deal with the Russians, more strategic economic partnership, as a bargaining chip. I don't know, but I mean, who knows?
Any opportunities we can find to bring about peace in the world.
Understood. What are you expecting to present to Zelensky tomorrow?
Well, I think tomorrow's conversations, a lot of it will be centered around what are the kinds of security guarantees that Ukraine is looking for. Because what Ukraine is looking for here.
This is probably the most talking point, if not, or second to the most important talking point. I mean, I guess during the Budapest memorandum, it was stated, that the countries will come to aid if the signatories were attacked by an aggressor. It was the signatories were Russians, the U.S., um, I believe UK are the primaries, and of course, obviously that didn't exactly pan out the way that the Ukrainians envisioned. What does security guarantee means down in the line? Eventually he's gonna mention about what happens if the Russians attack again in 2 years and 3 years, but he doesn't really mention on what that looks like from the American side, other than you know more money, more equipment. But I don't think that's what the Ukrainians want. Ukrainians want, if if this was to happen again, one, let's, hopefully it doesn't happen again. But if it were to, you know, are other countries willing to put boots on the ground to assist, uh, you know, likewise with the Article 5 of NATO?
Is okay, the war ends. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? How do we make sure that in 2 or 3 years the Russians don't come back at us? So they want guarantees built up so that they can protect themselves or prevent such a war from occurring in the future. So the details of what that would look like is something that hopefully we'll spend a lot of time discussing tomorrow. We had a long conversation about it yesterday with the national security advisors of multiple European countries. Some work has already gone into it, but now we're at a stage where we need to build some details on it, and then ultimately, obviously present that to the Russian side, who and get them to accept it. But first, we have to have our ducks in order.
What kind of security guarantees is the U.S. willing to make?
Well, that'll be part of the conversation tomorrow. At the end of the day, the truth of the matter is that any security guarantee that, the Europeans, there's a lot they can do and a lot they can offer. And it would be a huge concession. It would be a very big move by the president if he were to offer a U.S. commitment to a security guarantee. That'll be his decision.
That's never going to happen. Congress would never. I doubt Congress would ever. The American people would never allow that to happen, for one. And two, the Europeans have already volunteered a coalition of the willing to put boots on the ground to stabilize some sort of ceasefire, or I guess as defenders for Ukrainians. But at the same, but I guess the ultimate question is, what happens if those troops get attacked? Will U.S. come to aid if NATO troops are attacked, or any other European coalition of the willing is breached through another attack? Well, that's what the Europeans are afraid, is that that the U.S. will walk away.
And I want people to understand that. That tells you how bad, if he does it, it tells you how badly he wants peace, how much he values peace, that he would be willing to make a concession like that. But ultimately, that'll be a decision for the president to make. That's what we'll talk about tomorrow. I'm sure we'll spend 6-7 hours talking about these things, maybe more, and sort of get to a point where we have something more concrete. We've done a lot of work on it already, but some more work is required before we can say that we have a plan on security guarantees that unifies us.
What other economic levers does the U.S. have to use here? I mean, you've got the secondary sanctions, and you said perhaps there is something to be done with China. What about designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, which is something
useless, completely useless, because all of Europe has already done that, designated them as foreign terrorist state. But at the same time, nothing comes out of it. Even the sanctions that she mentioned, none of those has been imposed. The ones that were drafted by the Senate, as well as the secondary ones. I mean, even if you look at all of the Russian economy as a whole. Eventually Rubio is going to mention that, the Russian economy are in shambles. Well, I don't know. I mean, go look at their, the ruble currency. It's strong as ever somehow.
Lindsey Graham has been working on.
Well, those designations can be useful from time to time, but in this particular case, they're not going to change the course of the war. Look, can the U.S. inflict greater pain on the Russian economy, going after the banking sector, the oil companies, and things of this nature? Of course we could. Of course we can. And that always remains, unfortunately, an option. But just understand, if we get to the point where we're doing that, okay, it may make people feel good, and it may have an implication on Russia in the long term. But in the short term, what it means is that talks are over, that at this point, we are basically now stuck with another year and a half or two of war, of death, of destruction. That's what it means. We may get to that point, sadly and unfortunately, because peace is not possible, but that we're trying to avoid getting to that point. We want to give every opportunity possible for the Russians to say yes to something that Ukraine can live with. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think the president deserves a lot of credit for wanting to do that. No one else has tried to do that. Joe Biden couldn't have done it. No other leader in the world could do it. Frankly, he doesn't have to do it. Look, the war in Ukraine gets a lot of attention, and I'm not saying it's an irrelevant thing. It's a very tragic thing that's going on. But life in America on a daily basis will be largely unaffected whether there's peace in Ukraine or not. That's just a fact. We have a lot of issues we're focused on, not just at home, but around the world. But the fact that the president has dedicated this much time to a war between two countries on another continent tells you how much he...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. Huge respect to Trump for doing this. But what Rubio said about, nothing changes, with whatever I guess penalties we put on the Russians is that the outcome doesn't work. I think you also have to remember that yeah, the Ukrainians also don't really care. I mean, if you look at the last 14 to 18 months, how much territories have the Russians really advanced? Hundreds of square mile, if that, or hundreds of kilometers, if that. Um, and it's right now the front lines are pretty much at a stalemate. Yeah, the military support kind of dwindled from the U.S. and from Europe, but I mean, you know, the Russians are producing military arms at you know at the same level of Europeans and the U.S. combined, potentially surpassing production rates. So you look at that and you look at how the Ukrainians are defending against it. So
values peace, and we should be very thankful and grateful that we have a president who's a president of peace, who values peace and wants to use the power of his office to achieve the end of wars and the prevention of new ones.
But isn't the U.S. directly impacted because of that rare earth minerals deal? How important is that deal, and has Putin already affected that deal by bombing the region?
Well, first of all, that deal is important, but I mean, it's not. The United States has other sources of rare earth minerals. I think that deal is very important for Ukraine, and in terms of their own reconstruction and rebuilding, and to have American partners in a post-war Ukraine is of great benefit to the Ukrainian. Obviously, it would be great for us too. But I don't think that alone justifies, us being behind a war effort here. What we want to be able to do here is be behind a peace effort. We want to achieve the end of a war. So I'm not saying our interest in Ukraine are zero. What I am saying is the amount of time and energy that this administration has placed on this war is something that people should compare to some of the other issues we have around the world that deserve our attention as well. And the president just deserves a lot of credit.
yeah, yes and no. So he's saying that Trump spent 6 months and it's too much. In essence, I agree. But at the same time, the U.S. is also a signatory of the Budapest Memo. I guess you can call it indebted in a way. So, I'll make another video later down the road on the specifics and detailing what the Budapest Memo really means for the signatories and for I guess for future I guess for future Ukrainian securities, as well as what does it mean if it's breached again?
For putting so much time and energy behind something that is very, very difficult to end. It's a very difficult war to end. The Russians feel very strongly that they have the upper hand, that they're making progress. They don't necessarily feel pressure, and the Ukrainians feel very strongly that they were invaded, that they've been aggrieved, and that what the Russians have done is horrifying.
They were invaded,
and it should be stopped.
Actually.
So both sides are pretty dug in. And, we don't have sanctions on Ukraine. We have sanctions on Russia. We don't provide weapons to Russia. We provide weapons and assistance to Ukraine. So the U.S. has done a lot already with regards to this. But this president is trying to figure out how to end it, how to stop it. And I think that's incredible that we have a president willing to use the power of the United States, and the power. That's the goal here, is not to win the war, it's to end it.
So will you continue to put pressure on Russia in all ways in order to stop this? What is the next pressure point?
Well, in order to have a peace deal, both sides are going to have to make concessions. And so obviously, the Russian side is going to have to make concessions. One side cannot get everything they want. If in a negotiation, one side gets everything they want, that's not a peace deal, that's a surrender. That's the terms of surrender, and I don't think you're going to see surrender by either side anytime soon. So the reality of it is, in order to make a peace deal, Ukraine is going to have to accept things it doesn't like, and Russia is going to have to accept things it doesn't like. And,
Okay.
and we need to be able to use the influence of the presidency to push both sides to make those concessions.
Did Putin bring up a potential nuclear deal with the United States as part of this?
No. No, the talks were almost exclusively, and I would say, 99% were just about the war and about how to bring it to an end. And the Russians.
So he said 99%, but if you look at, I guess, if you look at, the big picture here, you have Treasury Scott Bessent is there, and tens, if not hundreds, of Russian economists, individuals that, business oligarchs are there as well. So I think there's definitely more than just the Ukrainian talks, potentially trade deals. But I mean, I guess in essence, to end the war. So.
Perspective, and don't people should not underestimate the value of meeting in person. They've had multiple phone conversations, but meeting in person really allows you to get a better gauge of how strongly one side feels about certain issues. We've met with the Ukrainians dozens of times. It's our first meeting with the Russian side in terms of at the level of President Putin, and obviously hopefully the next time we meet, it'll be because Zelensky's in the room and they're getting close to finalizing a peace deal.
Mr. Secretary, we wish you success tomorrow. Thanks very much for being here.
So let's break down a little bit more on what I think. I mean, the U.S. essentially did meet with the Russians face to face, not on a presidential level, but you have Steve Witkoff met with him 5 times. I think he's, in my opinion, I think he's very very much pro-Russian. Um, but that's a topic for another discussion. Um, but I mean, in the last time, maybe not the last time, but one of the time, where Zelensky and Trump met in the Oval Office, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows. But let me show you some of the breakdown of what the Russians really want in uh, as far as Ukrainian concessions. So the Luhansk and Donetsk region is what makes up Donbass. So they want this entire region, even this white area that's not highlighted. Um, so this entire region, this circle, is the um, is the Donbass region, and they want control all of this, and I quote, for a ceasefire, not for a peace deal. That's from what I've heard. And there was no discussion on the Russians giving up the Zaporizhia region, as well as the Kherson region in exchange for total control of the Luhansk and Donetsk, all of Donbass. So one of the reasons why I think that this is the Ukrainians are pretty dead set on, you know, defending this region is because these I guess these two regions are very very much strategic military control regions. Um, so if I switch back to the Google map, so we have the Donetsk and the Luhansk region. Um, if these regions were, I guess, fully controlled by the Russians, this would potentially make all of Ukraine vulnerable, uh, because these are more of strategic control points that prevents breakthroughs, breakouts from the Russian side. So if you look at the Donetsk region, this essentially straight to Pavlograd and Dnipro region. So this region pretty much, in some they control some of the Zaporizhia region, but Dnipro region would also be directly tied to the Donetsk. Likewise with Kharkiv, I'm still surprised that they haven't taken this area yet. But Luhansk would essentially break open Kramatorsk and potentially Kharkiv. And with those regions open, you go after Poltava, and the rest of Ukraine will be, will be potentially at risk. So that's why the Ukrainians are strongly against the idea of ceding these regions, and I can't blame them because you know, if you look at how the amount of uh, Russian advancements in these regions, it's very minimal in the last year and a half to 2 years. So they're definitely strongholds at this point. That's enough, you know, that's enough for today. Um, I'll make some videos on Budapest memo, and I'll definitely tune in for the discussion tomorrow between uh, Zelensky and Trump and Europeans. So thank you for watching, and yeah.